Good day everyone, I am Lauren May Venezuela. I am from Group 1, and before we start, let me introduce my group mates, Miss Pawaon, Miss Cervantes, Miss Montefalca, Miss Ortiz, Miss Ligan, Miss Angoling, Miss Barros, Miss Villar, Miss Bernales, May Venezuela, Miss Makatambad, and Miss Templa. So we are given 4 topics in a group. So the reporters in prehistoric art is Miss Cervantes, Miss Fernaldez, and Miss Venezuela. And in Egyptian art, reporters are Miss Ligan, Miss Pawaon, and Miss Angolin. And in Greek art, reporters are Miss Makatambad, Miss Villar, Miss Gail Templa. And lastly, in the Roman medieval reporters are Miss Montefalca, Miss Ortiz, and Miss Nina Barros. So, introduction to prehistoric art. What does prehistoric mean? Pre means before, historic means written history, and prehistoric means before written history. Prehistoric is defined as the time before writing, and without written records, we have only the works themselves and archaeological evidence to help us interpret them. Prehistoric art refers artifacts made before there was a written record, long before the oldest written languages were developed. People had become expert at creating forms and were both practical and beautiful. So, the Stone Age, the first human, the Stone Age, the first human artistic representation seems to have occurred about 100,000 BCE. All were created in the time period before the invention of formal writing, when human populations were migrating and settling on every continent except Antarctica. Some of the most dramatic examples of prehistoric art have been found in the caves frequented by the Stone Age human. Many of them are from as early as 30,000 years ago and are located in southern France and northern Spain. The best known are Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain. So this is an example of prehistoric art, the Lascaux cave. The majority of the subjects in these works of art are animals: bison, reindeer, horses, and even mammoth. The explanation for these cave paintings is still a matter of speculations, even today. One possibility is that these Stone Age people were creating paintings purely for aesthetics purposes. They just wanted to beautify their surroundings. Next example is the Venus figurine. An excellent example of the name people gave to the hundreds of small prehistoric statues of women they found. They are labeled Venus figurine after the Roman goddess of love. So the most famous of these is the statue of a woman called the Willenford Venus, depicted with exaggerated sexual features. She has no arms or facial features, but she doesn't need them to convey fertility. Most scholars agree that these prehistoric voluptuous figurines reflected a deep interest in fertility and ultimately the survival of the individual and the family, of all of which were matters of great concerns to stone people. So another examples of prehistoric arts is the Cave of Altamira. Colorful and charcoal drawings 36,000 years ago. Altamira Caves in Spain, uncommonly well-preserved depiction of animals and of human hands. Next is the Bimbitka Rocks shelters. Next is the Grotte de Font de Gaume. Next, the Cueva de las Manos. Gobekli Tepe or Tape. And lastly, the Gyeongyeon rock paintings. That's all for my part in prehistory. I will give the floor to the next reporter.
Have a pleasant day, everyone. I am Ruth Bernaldez, and today I will be discussing the Paleolithic era in prehistoric art. Paleolithic art, it is also called the Old Stone Age. It is a period in human prehistory that is distinguished by the original development of stone tools and which represents almost the entire period of human prehistoric technology. It extends from the earliest known use of stone tools by hominids 3.3 million years ago. Paleolithic also refers to late Upper Paleolithic period. This began roughly around 40,000 years ago and lasted through the Pleistocene Ice Age, which ended about 8000 BCE. During the Paleolithic era, it was also the rise of Homo sapiens and their ever-developing ability to create tools and weapons. Upper Paleolithic artwork. The art of the Upper Paleolithic represents the oldest form of prehistoric art. During Upper Paleolithic, figurative art and non-figurative art were emerged at that time. Figurative art is present in Europe and Southeast Asia beginning between about 40,000 to 35,000 years ago. The emergence of figurative art has been interpreted as reflecting the emergence of full behavioral modernity and is part of the defining characteristics separating the Upper Paleolithic from the Middle Paleolithic. The discovery of cave art of comparable age to the oldest European samples in Indonesia has established that similar artistic traditions existed both in Eastern and in Western Eurasia 40,000 years ago. The non-figurative cave paintings, it consists of hand stencils and simple geometric shapes, are somewhat older, at least 40,000 years old and possibly as old as 64,000 years. Examples of Upper Paleolithic art in Europe are rock and cave painting, sketching, jewelry, carving, engraving, and sculpting. There were also musical instruments like flutes, as well as sculptures made of clay, antler segments, bones, stones, and ivory, such as the Venus figurines, functional items including spear throwers, perforated batoons, and lights were also embellished. Now let us proceed to the characteristics of Paleolithic art. Paleolithic art concerned itself with either food, hunting scenes, animal carvings, or fertility like Venus figurines. Its predominant theme was animals. It is considered to be an attempt by Stone Age peoples to gain some sort of control over their environment, whether by magic or ritual. And last, Paleolithic art from this period represents a giant leap in human cognition, like abstract thinking. And that's all for my report. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon, everyone. As a continuation of the report of Miss Ruth, I am Malini Ardenisa Cervantes, and I was tasked to discuss the Mesolithic period and Neolithic period in prehistoric art. So without further ado, let's start. So first, we will discuss the Mesolithic period or the Middle Stone Age, from 10,000 BCE to 8,000 BCE. So communities began to form during the Middle Stone Age. Although these were mostly still nomadic, there were signs of some agriculture. Stone tools become more advanced with spears made from altars and tips of objects sharpened into points. So the use of fire encouraged the finishing of more sophisticated clay sculpture. So, Mesolithic cave art. It is a human figures and life where the main subject matters of painting and engraving. So, cave paintings using human hands as stencils along with abstract symbols were found at La Cueva de las Manos or Cave of Hands in the Patagonia region of Argentina, dating back to 7300 BCE. So the paint was mouth blown over the hand using hollowed out bone as straws. So you can see in the picture, the left to right, it have a animal feet and human hand, and also it have a geometric pattern. So over 200 hand stencils were created. Various pigments were used from nature, including iron oxide to create red and purple, and manganese oxide to create black. White pigment was made from kaolin and nitroglycerite for yellow. Also at the La Cueva de las Manos, over 150 petroglyphs were found of animals including horses, bison, ibexes, and mammoths appear on the cave walls. So Mesolithic sculptures. So artists during the Mesolithic period favored relief sculptures. So a smaller number of small stone sculptures were found. Trees were plentiful after the Ice Age and sculptures were also carved from wood. Next is ceramic art. So Japanese ceramic art from the Jumon culture of the 11th millennium BCE is most notable for the decorative pattern element expressed into wet clay using sticks. So Chinese pottery was embossed with stamp. So what is megalithic art? So megalithic art was first developed during the Mesolithic period and hit its peaks during the Neolithic period. It was created with large heavy stone that signified a sense of permanence. So in rock art, it is termed one stone is called a menhir. This was often carved with patterns or pictures. Grouped together, they form an assemblage. Stones were also used to build architectural spaces. So Göbekli Tepe from 9500 to 7500 BCE is a monumental complex in Sanlarf in southeastern Turkey. It is used megaliths to design shrines. The surrounding contains numerous relief of local animals. So now let us discuss the next topic, which is the Neolithic period or the New Stone Age. So it is from 8000 BCE to 3000 BCE. So the nomadic lifestyle ended and was replaced with agrarian communities. So the societies were formed sophisticated. Cereal grains were cultivated, tools were constructed from plowing and tilling, animals became domesticated. So during this time, the first home were constructed. Utilitarian objects were painted. Weaving of clothes fabric was more developed as craftsmanship of art progressed. People adorned themselves with jewelry. So cities began to grow while laws were implemented and religion was practiced. During the Neolithic period, Kongs began to appear in the Jiangsu province in China as a part of a Liangzhu culture. So the long tube with a wide hole in the center often has curving on the side. So only the elite could afford work in jade. Although found in tubes, art historians are still not sure what the purpose of the Kong was. The building of Stonehenge. So Stonehenge is a sandstone prehistoric European assemblage that was constructed between 3000 to 1600 BCE. So it stands alone on a large plain in Wiltshire, England, in the United Kingdom. So the stone measured 30 feet tall were assembled in a circular formation, so the diameter of which measures 320 feet. While the sandstone is local, the inner blue stones are from Wales over 200 miles away. So human remains and bones found here indicate Stonehenge was once a burial ground. So tools found on the site shows the constructions was the work of many tribes over the years. So large stones assembled and grouped together in a circular formation are referred to as a comlech or henge. So megaliths as a architecture during the Neolithic period. So a portal tomb or dolmen tomb were constructed during upright support stone with a cape roof, often covered with earth. So passage tomb were a further development made by adding long passage to the portal. A gallery grave is an elongated rectangle without a passage. So the monument of Branabonia complex, 50 km north of Dublin in County Meath, Ireland, had many functions. So they were used for social, economic, and religious purposes. So there are three main passage tombs here as well as the largest concentration of megalithic art in all of Europe. So first is New Grange. So it was designed with a passage chamber that illuminates during the winter solstice. At its mouth is the spiral of life or triple spiral engraving here from 3100 BCE. Second is the node. It has two passageways. So it is also surrounded by 7 satellites mound. A multitude of rock art was found here with engravings with geometric patterns including spirals, crescents, and wave. Art historians are still puzzled by much of the symbolisms. And the last one is Dot. It is situated about 2 miles away and suffered damage during an excavation in 1941. So that's it about my report, and now I will give the floor to the next reporter. Thank you and God bless.
Hello everyone, I am Jenny Ligan and together with Miss Maria Cristina May Pawaon and Miss Hadassah Faye Angguling, we are going to discuss the assigned topic, which is the Egyptian art. Egyptian art is known for its distinctive figure convention used for the main figures in both relief and painting with parted legs and head shown as seen from the side, but the torso seen as from the front. Egyptian art forms are characterized by regularity and detailed depiction of gods, human beings, heroic battles, and nature. A high proportion of the surviving works were designed and made to provide peace and assistance to the deceased in the afterlife. Egyptian art, ancient sculptures, paintings, and decorative crafts produced mostly in the dynastic periods of the 3rd to 1st millennium BCE in the Nile Valley of Egypt and Nubia. Egyptian art served those in power as a forceful propaganda instrument that perpetuated the existing framework of society. Much of what has survived is associated with ancient tombs. The course of art in Egypt paralleled the country's political history and is divided into three main periods, which are the Old, Middle, and the New Kingdom. These periods between these are known as the First Intermediate and the Second Intermediate respectively. The stone tombs and temples of the Old Kingdom were decorated with vigorous and brightly painted reliefs illustrating the daily life of the people. Rules for portraying the human figure were established, specifying proportions, postures, and placement of details often linked to the subject's social standing. An artistic decline at the end of the Old Kingdom preceded a revival of the arts in the more stable political climate of the Middle Kingdom, which was notable for its expressive portrait sculptures of kings and its excellent relief sculptures and painting. The New Kingdom brought a magnificent flowering of the arts. Great granite statues and bas reliefs glorified rulers and gods. Painting became an independent art, and the decorative crafts reached new peaks. So there are five kinds of Egyptian art, and that would be reported by Miss Maria Cristina May Pawaon.
Hi everyone, so my name is Maria Cristina May M. Pawaon, and I will going to report the five types of the Egyptian arts. So the first one will be the pre-dynastic arts of Egyptian. So the term pre-dynastic denotes the period of emerging cultures that precede the establishment of the first dynasty in Egypt. In the 6th millennium BCE, there began to emerge patterns of civilization that displayed characteristics deserving to be called Egyptians. Pre-dynastic art described a range of visual imagery and ornamental forms attested in Egypt and Lower Nubia from 4000 to 3300 BCE or before Christ era. Pre-dynastic Egyptian art spanning for approximately 3,000 years, the pre-dynastic Egyptian art period was made up of three dominant culture eras: the Meridi culture, the Badarian culture, and the Nakada culture. Often compared to the Neolithic period of art, pre-dynastic Egyptian art was named after the various areas where certain type of Egyptian settlements were discovered. As Egyptians began to settle along the Nile River and adopt more of the inactive lifestyle during the Neolithic period, very little archaeological evidence has been found for the years preceding 6000 BC. However, as Egypt entered into the pre-dynastic era, more settlements began to appear, which accounted for the vast majority of the pre-dynastic archaeological artworks that were found within Upper Egypt. So, second one, it will be the early dynastic Egyptian art. As more artwork were date back to the early dynastic period, more information is known about this artistic era in Egypt. Emerging after the amalgamations of Lower and Upper Egypt around 3000 BC, the early dynastic period is generally included as part of the first and second dynasties, which lasted until the start of the Old Kingdom during 2700 BC. The majority of Egyptian art within this period revolve around the theme of permanence and preservation, as artists attempted to safeguard and conserve everything is as much of the fixed way as possible. This led artists to produce sculptures and relief paintings that portrayed gods, humans, courageous battles, and nature, as these were meant to provide some from the comfort of the deceased in the afterlife. The common aesthetic practices of symbolisms, balance, and symmetry that were all used to create the iconic Egyptian artwork re-owned today were formalized during the early dynasty era or early dynastic period. These values infused Egyptian paintings and sculptures from the earliest period of art, with rock art existing as a good example of this. Artwork from the early dynastic period reached their peak in archaeology or archaeological sculptures that was known as the Narmer Palette, dating between 3200 and 3000 BCE or before Christ era. This artwork clearly demonstrated and celebrated the unity between Upper and Lower Egypt under King Narmer's rule. The engraving on the slab told the story of King Narmer's victory over his enemies and how the gods support his actions. So, and the third one, it will be the Old Kingdom art, which is the Old Kingdom art known as the Age of the pyramids. The Old Kingdom was characterized by revolutionary advancement and architecture. The Old Kingdom art of Egypt existed from the 3rd through the 6th dynasties, 2686 BCE to 2182 BCE, a period of political stability and economic prosperity. It is characterized by revolutionary advancement in royal funerary architecture. Both Egyptian society and economic were greatly impacted by the organization of major state-sponsored building projects, which focused on building tombs for their kings. These tombs were built in the form of great pyramids, and for this reason, the Old Kingdoms frequently referred as the Age of Pyramids. The fourth will be the Middle Kingdom art. Innovation during the Middle Kingdom included the solemnity evident in portrait of Senusret the Third and block statues. The Middle Kingdom was marked by the reunification of Egypt following a period of weak pharaonic power and civil war called the First Intermediate. Mentuhotep II restored stability in 2041 BCE after launching an attack that met with little resistance. After toppling the last rulers of the 10th dynasty, Mentuhotep II began consolidating his power over all Egypt, completing the process circa 2000 BCE. His subjects considered him to be divine or semi-divine, as suggested in a relief depicting the pharaoh receiving offerings. The last one will be the New Kingdom art. The New Kingdom art, the golden age of the New Kingdom, created huge prosperity for Egypt and allowed the proliferation of monumental architecture. The New Kingdom is known as the Golden Age of ancient Egyptian history and is the period of Tutankhamun, Ramses II, and other famous pharaohs. The wealth gained through military dominance created huge prosperity for Egypt and allowed for the proliferation of monumental architectures, especially works that glorified the pharaoh's achievements, starting with Hatshepsut. Buildings were at a greater scale than anything previously seen in the Middle Kingdom.
Hello everyone, my name is Hadassah E. Anggaling, and today I'm going to give you an example of Egyptian art. So the given example here is the Great Sphinx of Giza. So what is Sphinx? A sphinx is a mythological creature with the body of a lion and the head of a person. In ancient Egypt, a lot of times the head was that of a pharaoh or a god. So why were they built? The Egyptians built sphinx statues to guard important areas such as tombs and temples. So the Great Sphinx of Giza. The most famous sphinx is the Great Sphinx of Giza. It is one of the largest and oldest statues in the world. Archaeologists believe that it was carved around 2500 BC and that the head is meant to be likeness of the pharaoh Khafra. The Great Sphinx faces the sunrise and guards the pyramid tombs of Giza. When the Sphinx was carved around 2500 BC, the stones cut to create the sculpture were used to build the Temple of the Sphinx. Despite its name and its location, this temple has little to do with the Great Sphinx. Instead, it is dedicated to the god Ra, the sun god of Egyptian. It was built along an east-west axis. Legend of Sphinx. After the Sphinx was built over the course of next 1,000 years, it fell into disrepair. The entire body was covered in sand and only the head could be seen. Legend has it that a young prince named Thutmose fell asleep near the head of the Sphinx. He had a dream where he was told that if he restored the Sphinx, he would become Pharaoh of Egypt. Thutmose restored the Sphinx and later became Pharaoh of Egypt. Fun fact about the Sphinx. There were also famous Sphinx in the Greek mythology. It was a monster that terrorized Thebes, killing all those who cannot solve its riddle. It was the Greeks who gave the name Sphinx to the creature. The bird was likely added to the Sphinx during the period of the New Kingdom. A portion of the bird can be seen in the British Museum in London. Efforts are being made to preserve the Sphinx, but it continues to erode. What happened to its nose? No one is entirely sure exactly how the nose got knocked off. There are stories that Napoleon's men accidentally knocked off the nose, but that theory has proven untrue, as pictures have been found without the nose prior to Napoleon's arrival. Other stories have the nose getting shot off in target practice by Turkish soldiers. Many people now believe that the nose was led off by someone who considered the Sphinx evil. That's all for my part. I will now pass the floor to the next reporter. Thank you.
A pleasant day, everyone. At this moment, we're going to discuss with you about Greek art. First, we shall talk about what is Greek art. Greek art have 5 forms. First is architecture, sculpture, painting, pottery, and jewelry. Greek art is all about images, image of gods, images of heroes, and images of humans. The self-awareness of the Greeks is reflected in the ways they decided to visualize themselves and the world, both real and imaginary, surrounding them. Greek is the result of the combination of different elements of the Greek culture during its development, elements that were the basis of the Western culture. With the human body as the fundamental motif of their works, they look for a way to express movements and emotion through it, associating it constantly with myths of the period, literature, and daily life in Greece. Greek art models have been classics for those of us who live today, and their architectural style have been created for many years. In addition, Greek art is a mixture of elements that together form the basis of Western and Greek culture. Through the adoption of ancient cultures and the perfection of the elements, it included creating a new and innovative art. Hence, we will discuss the characteristic of Greek art. Therefore, Greek art is a broad and interesting subject. Its main features and characteristics are as follows. First is use aesthetic idealism to give perfect vision. When it says aesthetic idealism, it is talk about devoted to philosophical theories of beauty in nature in all forms of art. Furthermore, its works have both proportionality and balance. They seek to represent human figure in a perfect way, both in drawing and sculpture, so they focus largely on athletics to show perfect and muscular bodies. It's based on anthropocentrism. Take note that anthropocentrism literally means human-centered, but in its most relevant philosophical form, it is ethical belief that humans alone possess intrinsic value. In contradistinction, all other beings hold value only in their ability to serve humans or in their instrumental value. And also, they manifest nature as an idealized form, full of simplicity, proportion, clarity, and unity. Their knowledge of anatomy was broad. The gods Zeus and Athena stood out at all times. And lastly, they focused on the use of Greek mythology to make their sculptures. And that's all my report, and now I pass the floor to Ms. Makatambad to continue our discussion about Greek art.
Thank you, Miss Templa Abigail. Good day, everyone. I am Marvel Makatambad, and today I will continue the discussion starting the history of Greek art. The historical origin of Greek art goes back to the movements carried out by people during the Bronze Age, a period between the 1 and 2 millennia before our times, approximately in the years 1100 and 100 BC. The invasions to the Balkan Peninsula by the Achaeans created different colonies in which the Greeks imposed their civilization, giving as a result a civilization with similar characteristics. So now what are the Greek art stages? The first stage is the geometric stage, originating between the 10th and 8th century BC. Its name comes from the type of ceramics that were made. The human figure appears very schematized, and vases used in funerary rituals. The main theme of this period was death, and it occurred mainly in Athens. During this period, pixies, pictures, triglyphs, and sculptures were created. The second stage is the archaic stage. It is situated between the 8th and 6th century BC and is characterized by the expansion of the Greek polis using tyranny as propaganda. Within its commercial activity, important changes took place, and the first cities and temples that changed sculpture and ceramics appeared. Importance was given to religious worship, and important stone religious buildings and sanctuaries were built. The third stage is the classical stage, from the 5th to the 4th century BC, when Greece reached plenitude in all fields, mainly in sculpture. It was influenced by the Egyptian and Babylonian culture, from which a cultural mixture arose. The style of art at this stage was called severe style, and bronze and marble were most commonly used materials. And the last stage is the Hellenistic stage. It is between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century BC. Greek culture spread throughout the Mediterranean. It is the most baroque stage of art, and there was a great demand for architectural works, sculpture, and painting. So now, let's talk about the importance of Greek art. Greek art is the basis of European and Western culture setting, a precedent that remains today. Its classical models and sculptures have been created throughout the history. In addition, it was the basis of neoclassicism, which we see represented in different public and solemn buildings. When we say neoclassicism, it means a Western cultural movement in the decorative and visual arts, literature, theater, music, and architecture that drew inspiration from the art and culture of classical antiquity. Greek art emphasized the importance and accomplishments of human beings. Even though much of Greek art was meant to honor the gods, those very gods were created in the image of humans. Much artwork was government-sponsored, and it is intended for public display. So to continue this topic, I will now pass the floor to Miss Villar Princess Kit.
Good day everyone, I am Princess Kit Villar and now I am going to continue our assigned topic. So, architecture. The main element was the limestone or marble columns. They built theaters, stadiums, and racetracks. But the most important component was the temple that guarded the divinity statue. Its temples were rectangular and had rooms with the image of a god. The columns had to have three parts, the architrave, the frieze, and the cornice, and enjoyed great proportions and harmony. For example, the Temple of Hephaestus, Agora. Temple of Hephaestus is one of the fewer maintained and well-preserved Greek architectures which can be witnessed in its original architecture even today. The temple is a classic work of Doric architecture and dates back to 415 BC and was built and dedicated to Hephaestus, who was known to be the god of fire and craftsmanship. The temple has 19 columns in different dimensions covering 13.708 meters and 31.776 meters from east-west and north-south respectively. Next is a sculpture. It was their main artistic manifestation and they focused on the human body that represented different heroes, divinities, and people. They gave great importance to proportion, balance, and beauty using marble and bronze. They went from representing static figures to creating figures with movement and realism. So, for example, the Piplos Kore. Kore means pure girl, and a peplus was a shawl worn by women in Greece. The statue stands 1.18 meters high, is made of white marble, and is decorated with bronze pieces of metal all over the head and shoulders. Its facial features are beautifully carved, demonstrating the skill and artistry of the craftsmen at the time. The Papyrus Kore is now kept in the Acropolis Museum in Athens. Next is the paint. Religious, civil, and funerary subjects were considered an art. They painted on boards and ceramics maintaining the pattern of lines and drawing full of colors. They used tempera painting and encaustic with fresco painting. The most used colors were red, yellow, black, and white. Legends are historical battles, portraits, caricatures, and landscapes were presented. For example, the Minoan painting. Minoan painting was the first important period of painting in Greece. It is associated with the architecture of the palaces and is characterized by cheerful colors, naturalism, and delicacy in the rendering of forms. So that's all for my part, and now I will pass the floor to the next reporter.
Good day everyone, my name is Paula G. Durtiz and I'm going to discuss about the Roman medieval art topic. So first is, what is Roman medieval art? Medieval art encompasses a wide range of art and architecture. It also referred to the Middle Ages, which lasted roughly from the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD to the present day. In the 14th century, during the early stages of the Renaissance, the artistic heritage of the Roman Empire and iconographic style of the early Christian church were fused with the barbarian culture of Northern Europe to produce work during this era. Over the course of these 10 centuries, a wide range of artistic styles and periods emerged, including early Christian and Byzantine, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings, Romanesque, and Gothic. The medieval period produced grand monuments and architectural masterpieces, such as the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, celebrated mosaics in Ravenna, and illuminated manuscripts, such as the Lindisfarne Gospels. Because the period produced a large volume of art with historical significance, it is still a rich area of study for scholars and collectors, and it is regarded as a monumental achievement that influenced the development of modern Western art. The history of medieval art is extensive, spanning across several centuries and genres. Medieval art was popular in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Some most valuable examples of Middle Ages art can be found in churches, cathedrals, and other religious structures. The use of valuable materials such as gold for objects in churches, personal jewelry, backgrounds for mosaics, and as gold leaf in manuscript was also prominent. Through the Middle Ages, it did not begin or end on a specific date. Art historians generally divide medieval art into three periods: early medieval art, Romanesque art, and Gothic art. So let's begin with the early medieval art. Between the 4th century and 1040 AD, art from the early medieval period was created. The Catholic Church and wealthy oligarchs commissioned projects for specific social and religious rituals during this time period. Many of the earliest examples of Christian art can still be found in the Roman city catacombs or burial crypts. Artists were commissioned to create works for churches based on biblical stories and classical themes, and interiors were lavishly decorated with Roman mosaics, ornate paintings, and marble incrustations. A significant portion of the art produced during this period was also influenced by the Byzantine work from the Eastern Mediterranean region. It featured glass mosaic, wall painting, metalwork, and carved relief in precious materials, among other media. Byzantine art was conservative in nature, focusing on religious subjects, and much of it lacked realism. Paintings in particular were flat, with no shadows or hint of three-dimensionality, and the subjects were generally more serious and somber. So that would be all. I would like to pass the floor to the next reporter because she will be the one that will continue to tackle the Roman medieval art topic. So I hope you learned something and
Hello everyone, I am Charity Montefolca and I am going to discuss the history of medieval art, the types and materials used in medieval art. European art during the Middle Ages developed out of the artistic heritage of classical antiquity, the Roman Empire, as well as Christian iconography. To this mixture must be added the influence of the Middle East in the forms and ideals of Byzantine culture. Interestingly, at the start of the medieval period, nearly all works of art were commissioned by religious authorities or secular leaders, and most were actually created by monks. So by the end of the period, the field of the arts had expanded significantly beyond its monastic origins. Not only were the majority of artists laymen, but many pieces of art had also been commissioned by wealthy capitalist patrons for their own enjoyment. Even so, for 600 years, Europe was a cultural backwater. The Christian Church, which was based in Constantinople and Rome, was the only institution to survive. Therefore, it should come as no surprise that during the medieval era, the church was the primary patron of building and other forms of art. So here are the types of medieval art. We have the architecture, sculpture, paintings, and the stained glass art, mosaic, and tapestry. So medieval architecture is the term given to medieval buildings created during the Middle Ages, which encompass civic, ecclesiastical, and military structure. So pre-Romanesque, Romanesque, and Gothic are the main styles used in the Middle Ages architecture, while cathedrals and castles constitute the majority of the surviving medieval structures. Examples of municipal and medieval style houses may be found across Europe. In medieval paintings, it usually depicts religious subjects or topics of war. The practice of portrait painting did not begin until the end of the medieval era. So human faces in paintings throughout the era were very flat, unrealistic, and looked alike. And human and animal body parts are disproportionate and usually elongated. So medieval painters had not yet learned how to handle perspective, so architecture and landscapes are awkward. Medieval sculpture, similar to medieval painting, it frequently depicts military and religious themes. So human figures are exaggerated and the perspective is unrealistic. So the Pieta, which depicts Jesus sitting on his mother Mary's lap, is one of the most often used instances of medieval sculpture. So Mary is sometimes shown holding a baby Jesus in her arms like a throne as Mary sits absolutely upright. And occasionally he is shown to be a grown man who has just been removed off the cross. Next one, we have the stained glass art. So the basic ingredients for making glass are sand and wood ash or the potash. So the mixture is melted into liquid, which when cooled becomes glass. To color the glass, certain powdered metal are added to the mixture while the glass is still molten. And molten glass can be blown into a sausage shape, then slit on the side before being flattened into a sheet. So it can also be spun with a spondyle iron into a round sheet. And a window's visual picture is made by layering various colored pieces of glass over a board drawn design. So the artist uses black paint to paint any small features such as shadows or contours that are necessary on the glass. Next is the mosaic art. So mosaics are made of stone and glass which fade hardly at all. The most detailed Roman mosaics are use small stones to achieve an effect like brush strokes. So especially in the eastern provinces of the Roman Empire, artists painted with stone using small vivid tesserae that resemble pointillist daubs of pigment. The last one is the tapestry. So this is one of the most expensive and time-consuming crafts. Tapestry making only truly flourished in Europe from the Middle Ages onwards at the hands of French and later Flemish weavers. So this growth of tapestry art coincided with the era of Romanesque and Gothic art, so both part of a religious revival when architecture, sculpture, and stained glass were also harnessed by the church to illustrate biblical stories to illiterate congregations. Now let me introduce to you the materials used in medieval art. We have the gold rust, foil or leaf, silver and other precious metals, similar to the ones used in goldsmithing. Expensive natural color pigments such as ultramarine made from the rare Afghanistan or lapis lazuli, rare types of ivory, and calf skin for vellum. So, one of the most famous examples of a Christian manuscript written on a vellum is the Book of Kells and many other expensive materials. So, that's about it. Thank you for listening and have a great day.
Good morning, everyone. This is Ina Esbarres, and today I'll continue discussing under medieval art. Medieval art, which includes a wide variety of art and architecture, refers to a period also known as the Middle Ages, which roughly spanned from the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD to the early stages of the Renaissance in the 14th century. Work produced during this era emerged from the artistic heritage of the Roman Empire and the iconographic style of the Christian Church fused with the barbarian culture of Northern Europe. The history of medieval art is expansive and covers a wide range of centuries and genres. Medieval art was prominent in European regions, the Middle East, and North Africa. And some of the most precious examples of art from the Middle Ages can be found in churches, cathedrals, and other religion doctrines. Also prominent was the use of valuable materials such as gold for objects, personal jewelry, background for mosaics, and applied as gold leaf and manuscript. Though the Middle Ages neither begin nor end neatly at any particular date, art historians generally classified medieval art into the following period. First, we have early medieval art, we also have Romanesque, and we have the Gothic art. So let's discuss the three of them. Romanesque art. Art took shape in the 11th century, initially developing in France.
flying buttresses, and decorative pinnacles, all contributing to taller, lighter building design. Similarly, Gothic sculpture borrowed motif from the architecture of the period since it was primarily used to decorate exteriors of cathedrals and other religious buildings. That's all for my part. Thank you.